Hi. All right, we are in fact live.
Thank Christ.
Yeah, I usually have those ready to go, but it's been
1 week.
since you looked at me.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's been also like a busy work week, so I just haven't had
yeah, me
time to
too.
like
Me
pop
too.
back and forth. But it's okay.
Yeah. And then next week I'm in the office. Ugh.
Ooh,
It's always a rough week. Oh, and the interesting part is opened a new office 5 minutes from our current office.
okay.
And the long-term plan, is to close the current office and open up another one in Bluebell, which I'll go to when it's open.
Yeah,
But it's going to be like 40% of the people. It's going to be like mostly a ghost town.
interesting.
So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
You're gonna be bored.
Yes, that is correct.
Get a second job.
I already have one.
Get a fifth job.
Okay. I need a fourth first.
Well, no.
Are you calling this one?
Teaching? Yeah,
Yes.
this is one.
Okay. Then all right.
You don't get paid for it, but it's a job.
All right. Fair enough. I mean, it is work that I do.
Yeah, it's work that you do. It's a job. Teaching, low totem, totem talks, teaching.
Yeah. That about rounds it up.
It all
Oh, you
checks
know
out.
what? Like something excellent has happened for Mason and I.
Oh,
So he reached out to me yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And he is looking for to get a new job, and he's gotten in. He's going to be apprenticed to a piano tuner. And so he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, I've got this thing going on where I'm going to apprentice to a piano tuner, but I need some pianos to practice on. Can I come tune your piano?"
I mean,
Like,
of course you
absolutely.
can.
You
Yeah,
can come
what?
tune my piano anytime.
Yeah. And then
So
if anything else, I mean, you have the instrument.
yeah,
He could really tune your piano as well.
that's right. That's right. I mean, once we're done.
Of course.
But yeah, that's like an enormous win-win.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I'm excited to have a tuned piano for the first time in a long time.
Right? It's always fun whenever somebody gets like even when they did it at Bucks, they tuned all of the like practice room pianos the one time,
Hmm.
and it's like you never realize how flat they sound because it just subtly goes out,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
and
And
you
it
don't
usually
realize
goes
because
out
it's less than a half
together-ish to
step.
an extent. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like it gets tuned, and you're like, wow, it was really bad. It was
Yeah.
really off. Fun stuff. All
Oh yeah.
right.
So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. When is that happening? It's just like,
He asked if he could come over on Sunday. I was like,
oh,
yeah.
nice. So it's like happening.
Yeah.
Cool. If we're not too tired from our Saturday
Yeah,
runs.
because he was like, this weekend sometime. I'm like, well, we're kind of busy Saturday, so I guess Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, we are quite busy on Saturday.
And Bill
Hopefully.
should be able to make it too, to do some listen throughs with us.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, so
That's fun.
yeah, getting a little bit of that outside perspective before we release will be nice.
For sure. I mean, I'm planning on once we get like what we would consider putting a pin in stuff.
Hmm.
I plan on like having a couple of people
Sending
listen
them
to
out,
it.
yeah.
Just like I want to get some opinions as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, for sure.
Also, like especially if we're planning on like sending it,
Hmm.
and not like immediately releasing it to
Right.
the public. My mother will disown me if I don't give her a copy of it first.
Yeah,
Like
of course.
she'll be like, oh, that's it then.
All right.
I only want you for your music.
Yeah. You know,
I'm only your mother, hoping you would give me music to listen to every couple of years.
that is the only reason.
All right. Listen, man.
Are you ready? I'm ready.
I feel like I'm ready to go.
Excellent. You just tell me when to count down.
Here's the thing. I'm gonna try doing a thing on my end today too. So let's Let's let you count down now.
3, 2, 1.
At first, I was a podcast called TotemTalks.
One line. All
That's
right,
it.
I'll take it. You
That's
got
it.
to cross all the keywords. We're moving on.
Yeah, it's
And the nice part is, the savvy listener will be immediately thinking, there are two very different artists that could have possibly been covered this week.
that is true, and it's both. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Totem Talks, Season 7, Episode 7. We are
Something else, 7.
7 squared,
Yes. Very lucky.
and we're hungry this episode.
We are.
We're
For
feeling
a very
a little hungry.
specific type of delicacy.
The only delicacy that will work for us, and you'll let us know what that is in a
I
few
will.
minutes. But before we do that, I want to thank you all for hanging out, having a good time, listening to some music with us, all that fun stuff. This is Nick.
I am.
I'm Pat. We're Totem Talks, and we are questing, I think is the term.
That is.
We're questing. We are adventurers, and we are looking to climb Mount Music to determine who the greatest artist of all time is.
A beautiful metaphor.
Exactly. And the question, as it always is, did we find that this week?
No.
Spoiler alert. Come on. Come on.
But that doesn't mean we don't have lots of interesting things to say.
Exactly. Why don't you let our lovely
to.
listeners know
Okay.
what we're covering today?
Well, to say the order in which we're doing it would kind of ruin the whole purpose of the confection
true, we
on
really
which
messed
the
this
episode is
up.
based. Well, the episode is based on a specific type of cake, and so we're going to
Yes.
start with cake. And the type of cake that we're doing is sponge cake. So we're going to follow cake up with sponge. Because everyone knows to make a sponge cake, first you bake a regular cake and then you insert sponge. I've never made a sponge cake.
I can't hear you at
You can't
all.
hear me.
You're completely muted to me. We might have to
Hello?
restart.
Hello? I'm muted to you? Check, check.
Let me see if it's my end.
I think it is.
My headphones are working.
They are?
Nope.
That is really bizarre.
Oh, try again.
Hello?
I can hear you now.
hello? You can?
You sound very echoey. It sounds like it's not your good mic.
Yeah, that's correct. Hold on.
We just talked for like a half hour with no problems before we
We haven't
started.
had problems like this in a very long time.
I know. It's usually me too.
Yeah, it says it's going through. It says everything, all the audio is running through the Steinberg, but everything coming out of my computer.
Try unplugging the Steinberg and plugging
That I
it back
did
in.
already.
Oh, you sound a lot clearer right now.
Really?
Yes, you sound
Okay, you're still
perfectly
coming
clear
out
to
of the
me.
computer only.
Okay, well. you've
Okay,
been
well, I'm going to
fixed.
unplug everything.
Yep.
What? Okay, I'm hearing things through my headphones.
That's great that you're hearing things through your headphones.
Okay, we're what?
Oh, you just
you
came
can't
in.
hear me?
That breath was. I could hear you very muffled, and now I hear you much clearer.
Okay. I have no idea what's going on, but I think it's working.
Yeah, you're definitely coming through your mic now.
Okay. You might just have to cut out like 5 minutes of this episode.
honestly, that's not the end of the
Not the
world.
end of the
Let
world.
me do
Yeah.
this. For anybody who may be watching, I'm going to play another video. I'm going to play the intro again. We don't need to intro it again, but that way I'll see. Will I see it? I'm just going to do this. This will show up when I'm editing the audio and
All
video.
right.
And I'll be like, oh, this is where I'm ready to start. So when I take this down, you'll count in your recording, and we'll go.
Okay. Do you want me to just get rid of the recording I have so far?
Oh, no, no, no. Let's just go.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Right. So I don't know where we were at.
Who knows? We've just had a whole bunch of audio problems.
We had a whole bunch
It
of
is what it
technical
is.
issues. Whatever. I'm just. You know what I'm gonna do?
What are you gonna do?
You were talking about the two bands. You mentioned
I
Cake, and then
did,
you were
yes.
muted for a long time.
Oh, interesting. I also talked about Sponge.
Sponge is the second band because the entire theme of this episode is Sponge Cake.
That's right.
But because we can't do everything right all the time,
That's true.
even though our theme is Sponge Cake, we're going to start with cake and end with
That's
sponge.
true. I mean, it would be the first mistake we've made.
Yeah, it would be truly the first mistake we've ever made,
Definitely.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now is bring us into Cake. Cake is an American rock band from Sacramento, California, and they've been active from 1991 to the present day. We covered 3 albums, as always. We started with Motorcade of Generosity, which was released in 1994. We followed that up with Fashion Nugget, my nickname in high school, also
Totally.
was released in 1996. And then we closed things out with Showroom of Compassion, which came out in 2011.
That's right.
And as Cake is my band,
Take it away.
I will take it away. And here's what I'll tell you. Based on my knowledge of Cake and based on the genres that Cake was telling me they are on the Wikipedia, Cake is a couple of liars. Because whatever genres they're saying they are, this was not it. This was not. I wouldn't consider this alternative rock so much as like alternative ska almost.
Okay.
And that might be the presence of a trumpet player
Could be.
swaying me in that direction. But I do think that like a lot of the like beats and rhythms and like the energy of the songs felt very ska like. And I mean 1994 is pretty much the perfect time for ska to have been around.
Sure.
So it's weird that it's not discussed to me. Like we've covered ska bands on the podcast before. I've listened to ska bands outside of the podcast before. It's
Interesting.
It's
That never occurred to me to think.
It's closer to ska to me than to alternative country, which is one of the genres that it's set on this. I don't know. Either way, what I'll tell you is this is a group that is enjoyable on this album. I wouldn't say they're going to be climbing any like charts of favorites, but if you're interested in like their music at all, if you like their style, this album showcases it very well. I think they do a lot of stuff well. The issue kind of that I have with this band is almost a similar issue that I have with like some punk bands. Their like aesthetic and their shtick is like very cheap instruments and very like lackadaisical performances. So upon repeated listening, that becomes a little clearer. You can kind of hear the cheapness. I mean, they kind of pride themselves in the fact that like John McCrae, the lead singer, his guitar was like a $60 starter guitar. And so you
Fascinating.
never can get the same tune twice. Like it always sounds different. Which like, sure, I get it. And like they're making good music for what they're using. But like part of it for me, like that wears a little bit thin to me as like a musician, as like somebody who like is very into music. That wears a bit thin, but I do enjoy listening to the album. So I'm kind of like of two minds about this group so far.
Okay. So I came into this. I mean, surprisingly, I found out there's a what was their biggest hit later on was not one that I actually recognized. Um, but the two Cake songs that I think of are their cover of "I Will Survive" and "Short Skirt, Long Jacket," both of which are like okay to me.
Yeah.
Like they've got that like almost Sprechtica song type vocal where it's like not even
Yes.
really a song melody. So when right from the first song, the lead singer was actually like singing notes, I was like, oh, that's not what I expected.
At all.
And like kind of a good way. And you mentioned the trumpet and the uniqueness that it gives the band. I really dig that. I feel like no one sounds like Cake, um, except for them. You know, I think there are definitely some comps. So it's like very garagey. So part of that is kind of what you mentioned, like the looseness of the performances, maybe the cheaper instruments.
Sure.
Although I do think there were some well written guitar parts, which is actually much harder to do on a really cheap guitar.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but it almost had like some of the raucousness of like the Matthew Sweet albums we listened to, but also like it was like that point in between Matthew Sweet and like the Strokes and like by
Right.
2000, but also like with a trumpet. Um, and those are artists that I like. I mean, I think this. I came into Cake thinking like, all right, well, it'll probably just be fine.
Yeah.
But I listened to this, I'm like, oh, I actually like it. You know, I think it's better than what I had expected.
Sure.
And so I took that into Fashion Nugget. And this time, the comp I would give right off the bat from the first song or two is like pre-Arctic Monkeys. Um,
Okay.
and I hear that a little bit in the vocal style too. Um, the Distance was on this record, which was like a double platinum single, and did not know that one. Um,
You
I don't
don't
know
know
how
that song?
I don't know how it passed me by, but it was their biggest hit, and it was not the hit by them that I knew.
Yeah.
Um,
That's shocking to me that you didn't know that song. I
yeah,
feel
me
like the
too.
chorus of that song was everywhere.
It probably was.
That's fair.
It probably was. And they've got Greg Brown playing electric guitar now, as well as John McCrae, which definitely helps. And I think it's another album that is mostly very good to me. I felt like the weak point was probably what I'm going to call the title track, which was Nugget, which I did not particularly care for that much.
That's fair.
But as a general rule with Cake, what I'm kind of coming away with album after album is like, oh, this is a band that like is truly unique. They're definitely doing something that is sort of like what some other artists have done in the past, and sort of sounding like it's going to influence a lot of artists in the rock genre going forward. But they still kind of stick out as their own thing, and I really respect that about a group. And so Cake through two albums was definitely a more pleasant listen than I expected. It was definitely a net positive where I thought it was going to be a net neutral.
Sure. And listen, I agree with you on a lot of your points. Uh, like I said, I'm of two minds about them because part of their like go-to aesthetic is like it runs thin to me, and honestly, they're suffering a bit from so many other artists we've done having a similar approach, but maybe not executing it as well. But like, if enough people do it, where I'm already annoyed about it going in.
Hmm.
I get that, but like musically, they are interesting and unique. I've heard a number of Cake songs throughout life, whereas I don't really. They're not in my head, but I pretty quickly recognize Cake
Sure.
for their uniqueness. And John McCrae has a very unique style to his voice.
Yeah.
Whether it's the speak sing or the lyrical singing that he does on and off. One thing that I've noticed in the first album, and then it's coming into this album as well, but the last album also has it, which we'll get into. They do songs like one song an album that is like the title of a much more famous song, and it's very weird to me because like this is a band who's arguably you could argue their most famous, but definitely at least their second most famous song is a cover. "I Will Survive" by Gloria
Sure.
Gaynor. So like when I saw Jolene on the first album,
Oh yeah.
I was like, "What?" And it was not that song.
No, it was not.
And there's another song on the next album that I'll get to, but it was something that I started to realize with them. There are a couple covers on this album. So they do "I Will Survive," obviously. They do "Perhaps," which is not written by a member of the band, from what I can see. And then they
Right.
do a song written by Willie Nelson,
That's right.
which almost was my 6 degrees, but I chose not to make it my 6 degrees. But just a couple covers on the album, which typically I would, be a little more punitive towards.
They're
But
very
because
different.
of how good they make the cover, I honestly think like a cover can be a benefit to you
Hmm.
if it showcases how good you are at putting something in your own style.
And if it doesn't overshadow your own work too,
Yeah, which it definitely
which I don't
doesn't.
think it doesn't.
So those are my thoughts. I'm similar to you, slightly more on the positive side, although still a bit torn and of two minds about this band, if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, moving on to Showroom of Compassion. So this is 2011, and here's what I'll say. I can hear the time passage, which I'm happy about. This is not an album that I felt could have come out in 1997 and would have felt the same. I
Hmm.
definitely hear some growth in the sound. It still has that Cake
Yeah.
signature,
Hmm.
which is good that it has the Cake signature. And I think a lot of the growth has to do with John McCrae being the only consistent member of this band.
Sure.
So the reason it has the growth and maturity may be more attributed to a bunch of new members coming in
Sure. And I would
rather
say
than
Vincent DiFiore as well on trumpet and euphonium and a few other things was also in throughout.
he was in throughout the albums we covered,
Oh, okay.
but he's
He was
not the
okay.
he
No, on the
hasn't been
ones
in
that
the band the whole time.
gotcha.
So John McCrae is the only member of the band that's been in the band the whole time.
I wonder if we'll
So
see that reflected in another artist this week.
I wonder. But in this one, they did. Well, where was it? Oh, in the action. I must have listened to a deluxe version then. So they have a song on the deluxe version of Showroom of Compassion called "Never Gonna Give You Up,"
Huh.
which is not the "Never Gonna Give You Up" you would think it is. But that's where it really clicked. Like they do songs that are more famous songs, and they have the same title. But this one, their big cover is a Frank Sinatra cover of "What's Now Is Now,"
Yeah.
which they did well. It's hard to cover Frank Sinatra when you're not a crooner,
Right.
which John McCrae is
It's
not a
not.
bad singer. He's not a
No, he's
terrible
not.
singer, but he's not a crooner. He doesn't have a
Definitely not.
voice that you're going to be wanting to hear a croon
Yeah.
from. What I'll say here is, the good stuff, growth. It felt a little more put together. There was no like there wasn't as much sarcasm on this album, which is kind of what I attribute to Cake.
Okay. Yeah.
Like if sarcasm was a musical genre,
Sure. Sure.
that's where I get from Cake. And I felt like this album tried to take itself more seriously, but still keep the shtick of like cheap instruments, a little bit more lackadaisical, and that kind of fell a little flat to me. On each individual song, still an enjoyable listen. There's talent here for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like this album. There were two things that stood out as different to me. One, when they were doing harmony vocals, they felt more full, a little bit
Yeah.
more lush. They sounded better. The production was maybe a little bit more rounded out. For some of these sounds, it felt smoother overall. And I think that also was part of like the additional keyboard, organ, synthesizer parts that were used more as like atmospheric or to create like a little bit of texture within the songs. And I think that boded well for a lot of the songs. Um, and so again, it was another positive for me. So I went in thinking like, oh, all right, well, hopefully it's fine. And then I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I actually liked every one of these albums. Um, so,
Which is not what I was expecting either. And I
yeah,
will say, like, I definitely feel like I'm being a little more critical of them than you. I did
Yeah.
enjoy each album. I did enjoy listening to them. I'm more calling out little things that I noticed, but this is not a band that I would have a problem listening to more from.
Right.
And based on a lot of other bands we've listened to on this podcast, they are not a bad band
No, not
from
at
what we've
all.
heard. I guess I'll start talking about them. One thing that I wanted to call attention to about this album, real quick, one of the best like personnel notes ever,
I'm listening.
because Gabriel Nelson is the bass player in this album, and he's credited with bass guitar, electric guitar, ream organ, and other things. And I love it.
I do love that. Oh, you
Just
know what else was
credited as
important
other
about this
things.
album? I
Yeah.
think it is up to the point when it came out, it had been, and there are a lot of reasons for this, and it's not just like a diss on the band at all, but it was, I think, the lowest selling number one album on a
Oh,
chart, like
interesting.
up to that point in history. Because obviously we're just going towards a place where albums can be very popular and also not sell a lot because people are only streaming it instead of buying
Yeah.
it.
I truly can't remember the last time I bought an album out of necessity.
Hmm.
It's very rare. I'll buy an album to support an artist, and
Sure.
but not at all
Hmm.
because that's the way I want to listen to it.
Yeah,
With the exception of like if we get vinyl,
sure.
but that's about it. Now, Cake. Some stuff about Cake. And the first unique fact about Cake is not only going to break your heart, Nick,
Oh man,
it's going to ruin the theme of this episode.
no.
I'm sorry. The unique fact about Cake is that they are not named after the food cake.
Well, what on earth could they be named after then?
They are named after the verb, as in to cake something, to cover or become encrusted by something. Like if
Who
mud
would
gets
ever
caked
know?
on your boots.
Oh
Oh
man,
yeah, listen, it's a very little known fact, but it's
yeah,
certainly like why ruin our
yeah.
fun
And
cake?
Sponge is not named after a sponge. It's named after like to sponge off of someone and like just be like a leech upon them.
Nick, that would be honestly, I wish that was true because that would have been the funniest thing
I know
if that was a real fact. Okay.
it would have been.
So that's a unique fact is like you're named after like one of the most popular foods on earth and you're like no, it's not that. It's the slightly more obscure verb of cake. Like
Such
come
a
on.
such a cake move.
Such a cake move. All right. So I went with a kind of fashion nugget as their highlight. But I wanted to get a little more individual. So for like individuality's sake, it's not so much the album Fashion Nugget as it is the two songs, The Distance and I Will Survive. So I Will Survive, it obviously came out in 1996 with Fashion Nugget. It was a hit. It reached number 38 on the charts. It was extremely popular, put them on the map. And then in 2000, The Distance was used on an episode of The Simpsons, which is really when that started to hit its stride. And then it started getting used in movies and soundtracks all over the place. It was an instrumental version originally on The Simpsons due to licensing, but they did eventually replace it in syndicated airings, and I believe on the streaming platforms now, it's the lyrical version of the song.
Okay.
So it's kind of Fashion Nugget as their highlight, but really just those two like little blips about Fashion Nugget that really like solidified Cake as in the nomenclature
Sure.
and the
Yeah.
zeitgeist of the world. The low light is very, very annoying to me because, you promised me that we probably wouldn't have to talk about this for the rest of the season.
No, are you serious?
I swear to God. Pete McNeil, who drummed for Cake between 2001 and 2004, was sentenced to 15 years to life in a California state prison for, trigger warning right here, I'm going to give you 2 seconds, or I'm going to give you 5 seconds of silence, for child molestation in December of 2014. The incident
Jeez.
occurred during a Thanksgiving party that he attended where the victim was 3 years old.
Oh my Jesus
So I would
Christ.
consider that pretty low.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
not with the band at the time of the occurrence, and only drummed with them for 3 years out of the, so I'm not gonna condemn the whole band here.
No, I'm sure
It
that.
also isn't the, if it was like McRae, who is like the face of the band, the
Sure.
guy who's
Yeah.
been there the whole time. But one of the drummers of this band is in prison for that, and that's a low light. And you broke a
Yep.
promise to me.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know, and I didn't want to be quite honest.
Neither
with
did
you.
I. Neither did I. All right. We'll get some nice things now. And this was tough to find. I'll be honest with you. There was one nice thing I could find, and it was that the band is pretty good about conservation in the fact that during their summer tours, when they tour, they give away a bunch of trees to fans under the promise that they will put them in good homes.
Nice.
They'll make the fans compete in like dance-offs or tree trivia, and then give away a bunch of trees during the course of the tour to be planted, usually like in the hometown of the area and
Cool.
so forth. So that's really nice. A good sense of conservation.
I dig it.
Now, meanest things. I have a real one and a less real one.
Okay.
The less real one, the first one I'm going to talk about, is their 1996 cover of "I Will Survive,"
Okay.
which Gloria Gaynor came out and called it by far her least favorite version because she hated how they added a bunch of profanity and changed the lyrics to make it more profane and less like empowering than her version of it.
Okay.
So they upset that nice old lady
Okay.
and her song. It's pretty mean.
All right.
But the actual thing is, I couldn't even find enough. I couldn't quantify them. There are so many stories and reports about John McRae, the lead singer and only consistent member of this band, being just a complete asshole.
Yeah.
And like during his events and concerts and things like that. Some examples were just him either like he gets to a point where if the audience isn't like lively or into the songs enough, which this is not a genre I equate to that.
Yeah.
So that was a little interesting to me. If they're not like dancing and singing and shouting and screaming enough, he'll just like stop singing and like start yelling and pouting on stage during gigs.
Very mature.
So,
Yeah, that's
that's
an insane
pretty
way
mean.
to behave.
And honestly, here's what I'll say. This is not the first time we've run into
A
an
diva?
artist, well, yeah, a diva, but like a couple times throughout the run of this podcast, we'll find like, oh, there's one guy who is the only member of this band, and it's just a rotating cast around him.
Mm-hmm.
And like that guy typically ends up being kind of a prick sometimes.
Yeah.
And this is one of those times from everything I was reading.
Sure.
Now, again, allegedly.
Allegedly.
These are all unconfirmed stories, and John McRae could be a sweetheart.
That's true.
So these are the stories of the meanest things that they may or may not have done as a band.
Excellent.
To close things out with my 6 degrees, they have a song called Love You Madly. And in the music video, there's a cooking competition as part of it. And the judge of the cooking competition is Rick James.
Bitch.
Bitch. And it's between band members. The competition is between band members. And then the other members are TV personality Jeff Smith, as well as Phyllis Diller. Who is,
Fascinating.
just a wild cast for this cooking
take it.
competition music video. But Rick James. And
All right. That's great. I
that's
love Rick
my
James.
6 degrees.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, and with no further ado, let's move into Sponge.
I can't tell you how annoyed I was when I looked up and saw that fact on the low light. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
know.
Like,
What are the odds?
apparently very high from,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
That's wild.
insane. Ay,
Indeed.
oh, Sponge.
Yes.
I just now realized. I guess I didn't get a good look at the album for Rotting Pinata before.
It's candy corn.
It's Candy Corn.
I didn't realize that at first either.
that's that's a divisive candy.
Yes. You know what else is interesting that I also just realized about this album? If you look at the personnel, under additional personnel, the talent agent is Stewie Griffin.
Perfect. Perfect. Do you think that's where Seth MacFarlane got the name?
Where else would he have gotten it?
It's true. The real question is Vinny Dombrowski. Do you think he's related to Dave Dombrowski, the owner of the Phillies, or the general man, or the general manager of the Phillies?
Probably.
I think they might be the same person.
I would imagine that they are.
Good. I'm glad we agree. All right. I think I'm good. Actually, you know what? Let me do this. Otherwise, it will bug me. Now I'm ready.
Okay. All right. I don't know if you. I just was looking at Slack.
Oh, I didn't see it. Hold on. Now I'm not ready. I'm unready.
We're confirmed 2 to 6 because quoted that is the busier time, which like I'm fine with, but it's just one of those things where like if they would have just said, "Hey, when we're booking you, we would like you on this date from 2 to 6," instead of we find out when they post it on social media. Like that's all I want. That's all I want.
Listen, here's my thing. Okay, I have shifted very firmly to Team Mason for this. He's been against this for the last like 4 times we've tried to get here. And I was like, I see where you're coming from, but I'm here. And like, I mean, this is every time there's something.
It's really annoying.
Every time there's something, and it's like it's not little things. Like that's a huge gap.
Yeah. And honestly, it's the better time to play down there.
Yeah. Oh,
so please
sure.
just tell me this when you book us, however many months ago. Just tell us. Just tell us. Just tell us.
It's just frustrating. It's frustrating that it's something every time. I mean, literally, there hasn't been a single time that we've played there where there hasn't been some type of frantic last minute change. Whether it's we're supposed to be inside, then we're outside.
Yep.
We're inside or at a different time, or blah blah blah. Like multiple times.
I know.
So it's just frustrating, and it's far as heck. And I'll be honest with you, like, the reason we started doing that, and we talked about it, was, the getting into other places.
Yeah.
And that has shown 0 results.
That it has.
It is what it is, though. Whatever.
It is.
We'll figure all that stuff out at another point.
We will.
What's most important is this.
Yes. Sponge in 3, 2, 1.
Sponge is an American rock band formed in Detroit, Michigan in 1992, and they were active from 1992 to 2000, and then again in 2001 to the present day. We covered 3 albums by Sponge. We started with Rotting Pinata from 1994. We followed that up with Wax Ecstatic from 1996, and then Lavatorium from 2021.
Yes.
Yes,
and I will go.
All true facts.
Yeah. All right. So, this is a group where their biggest hit is on their first album, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to say I didn't know it, but I was definitely like, have I heard this? I'm not 100% sure pretty much the entire time. Like, I was not ready to... The song is Plowed. and I was not 100% ready to say whether I knew it or not the whole time through. So it could have
Sure.
sounded vaguely familiar. But it's 1994, and like this is taking a lot from grunge. No surprise there. I think they do definitely utilize some interesting and unexpected chord progressions. Um, and I think that like they could have easily been popular. This is not the first time we've looked at a group in the first half of the 90s who was putting out music like this and thinking like, oh, huh, yeah, I mean, they probably could have blown up a little bit more. Like the songs are pretty solid. It was very reminiscent of like I think it was Toadies for me last season when we had kind of a similar thing. Like, oh, I mean, the songs are pretty good. I don't really know any but that one hit, but like I don't know why they're not going anywhere. Um, but I guess the other side of the coin of like every song is potentially like good enough to be enjoyed is was there that one song or those two songs that really jumped out like, oh yeah, like this is it? And I don't think that they were on there, even amongst the ones that were more successful for them. They did not have a song that felt like a long lasting, impactful hit that would always be remembered. Um, but not bad. Like I don't want to sound like I'm coming across like I did not disenjoy listening to this record. I thought it was
Right.
very yeah. The most worried I was right before the song Candy Corn. There was just so much silence like for a while, so I listened to a version where it was originally a hidden track,
Yeah.
and then it was like shown as a real track after Raining on the album that I listened to, and I'm waiting there for like a minute, like what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Are they gonna start the song? Like, if you're gonna just make it its own track, you don't need to include all the extra silence that would be in between on the
I
CD.
I would be inclined to agree with you.
So so that was an interesting choice. But it's good. Sponge is good. Like they have talent in the band, and they're writing songs that are good songs.
Okay. For the most part, I agree with you. Sponge sounds good. I enjoyed listening to Sponge on this album. Here's my issue. The year is 1994, and this is an album that, while claiming to be alternative rock,
It's
is a
grunge.
grunge album. And everybody was coming out with grunge in the 90s, specifically around the mid 90s.
Mm.
And
Yeah, Midnight is
this
the tail end. I mean, if you're getting in a '94, like you're a little late.
right, and they are firmly in that grunge lane, and therefore you're competing with bands that you're not in the caliber of,
Sure.
to be quite frank. Like you're doing a genre that is so niche at the time that it creates such a like a visceral, like everybody recognizes grunge. And there's like a list of 4 or 5 grunge bands that will stand the test of time, and you're directly competing with them.
Hmm.
And it's not their fault. I mean, you couldn't have known that in 94, right? You couldn't have known in
Sure.
94 like who was doing what. It was all happening in the present.
Yeah. Right.
Coming from the 2024 mindset now, I've experienced a lot of grunge music because I grew up in an era where it was all super famous. And then I experienced even more grunge music because we do this podcast.
Right.
And I think they're firmly in the middle of the pack.
Sure.
And I think that's the the positive and negative of this group.
Hmm. Yeah, we're on the
Yeah.
same page.
So I mean, I'll move on to Wax Ecstatic. And to be quite honest, this is an album that came out 2 years later. And this band has now cemented itself to me, based on the first 2 albums, as a band who I would have believed you if you told me they recorded their entire discography in a week and then released it over the course of 30 years. That's what it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like there's any difference here. It feels like almost exactly the same grunge music, and now we're in the 96 range, so you're getting particularly late for grunge. They're labeled as post grunge here too, but it doesn't feel too post
Yeah,
grunge.
I know. I
It
agree.
feels like grunge, and it feels like Vinny Dombrowski is the writer for all of this.
Hmm.
And it just feels like Vinny Dombrowski likes grunge, is decent at playing and singing grunge, and steers into the skid of grunge. Nothing wrong with it. It's just those are the things that, if I had to guess what held this band back from like mainstream success,
Hmm.
it's that. It doesn't feel like they're setting themselves apart at all, even from now themselves, based on the fact that this is their second album and it's all
Sure.
bleeding together.
Yeah, and that was my first reaction. Was like, oh, did the album change? Um, and then it did. I will say that by the end, it was not the same. Like there was a little something new.
Sure.
Um, like they incorporated, I think specifically the instruments that they didn't have on the first album, but were on this one in some places were piano, saxophone, and cello. And that is a level of growth.
I
That
would agree
is
with
a
you there.
level of change, and I do appreciate that. And I think, I mean, you've given the negative, so I'll give the positive, which is, the album was pretty well reviewed at the time because the songs are well performed and the songs are pretty solid. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's a band that, again, this was not a bad album to listen to. I would listen to it again if somebody I was with wanted to hear it. Like, they have talent. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just not differentiating themselves from, they're not separating themselves from the pack. And I think that's,
Sure.
you know. So I'll just go on to Lavatorium. And,
Before you do, real
oh,
quick,
go ahead.
I did forget to mention I did enjoy the song "The Drag Queens of Memphis."
Okay.
That song actually had a catchy like hook to
Hmm.
me, and it was the first catchy hook of Sponge for me.
Sure.
So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. So Lavatorium, they started this album with the first couple of songs basically saying, hello, we are now Alice in Chains. And that
You
was
said
that
it.
that was the attempt that was made. That was it wasn't all that, but it definitely, the first handful of songs was just like, oh, this is a band that just was like, on our first couple of albums we tried to just be generic uh grunge band. Let's pick one in particular and really just go for that sound.
Let's really steer into it.
Yeah, exactly. There was a song on this album called Socially Distant because it was, of course, like a pandemic album.
Yeah,
And man, like I wanted to be behind the message, but the lyrics is cringing so hard.
it happens.
Oh God, yeah,
You can listen. You can be behind the message and not the
yeah.
delivery.
I was not behind the delivery at
I
all.
feel like we were like that with the last Bon Jovi album. We're
Yeah.
like, John,
Oh,
I
that's
get
so
what you're
sweet of you,
saying,
John, but
but
maybe
like,
don't.
come on.
Yeah, and I guess I have the same feeling here. Like, I don't want to rip you for trying to say something meaningful during what was a difficult time, but you didn't say it well. Uh, and then what's kind of interesting is I was like, are there some like country influences sneaking their way into some of these songs on the back end? Which was definitely a surprise to me, but I found out a little bit more later on that kind of made that make sense. But overall, I mean, I'm not gonna revisit this album, but it was not bad. Mostly, it was a solid effort, and
Sure.
that's Sponge, solid effort.
Listen, Lavatorium. Okay, we get to Lavatorium. The song starts. For the first half of the first song, my brain is thinking like, "Oh, I wonder how long this band was actually active then." Like maybe like one of those bands is active for like 5 years and then quits, and that's fine.
Right.
And then I start to hear the lyrics because the first song is Socially Distant, and I'm like, wait a second, what year did this come out? And then I'm like, this album came out in 2021. So this 1996 to 2021 is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And
94 to 2021.
no, I'm saying between the second
Oh,
and
the
third album
second.
we
Third.
listened
Okay.
to.
Sorry.
And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, I was like, wait, I couldn't believe the amount of years between those albums.
Sure.
I mean, 25 years, and everything about the first couple tracks, they did get more specific towards Alice in Chains, but that
Yeah.
doesn't make the year any different
No, I
at
understand.
all. And I was just, I was like, wait a second. Like, they sound exactly the same for the first, like, 5 songs. And I couldn't believe it. They did, you're right, they did start to finally mix it up. So, like, Sponge is labeled as a grunge, post-grunge band.
Mhm.
And I would posit that the second half of their last album, they finally post-grunged.
Sure.
In terms of, like, they were finally inserting other genres into their still pretty stereotypical grunge sound, but with slightly more influence. And again, I'm being critical. It wasn't bad. I mean, you said the same thing. It's not bad if you just take
Nope.
it as at face value.
Correct.
Like, I'm not worried about that part of it. For the rest of it, and for like what it means in total, like those are my struggles. Like, I can see why this band didn't have the mainstream success. It's like if they would have maybe started experimenting with other genres earlier, that could have helped. Or I don't know. I don't know what else could have happened. I mean, if
Sure.
I knew the key to being an uber successful band, we would be an uber successful band.
Sure.
So like something else though. I can see what didn't work here.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Sure.
For like, this isn't a lack of talent. This
No.
is a lack of ingenuity.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, that's everything. So I'm going to go through my facts, and I struggled to get all of them.
I'm sure you did.
So here's what I think might be unique. The guy that we've been talking about, who writes all the music, who is the lead singer and frontman, who also drummed and then played guitar, Vinny Dombrowski. He is currently the frontman for 3 different bands,
Okay.
and they're all different genres of music. So he's the frontman for Sponge, which is a grunge band. He's the frontman for a band called Crud, which does industrial music. And did you like that it's called Crud?
I did like Crud.
And he is the frontman for a band called The Orbit Sons, which does like country music and like jams and improvisational shows.
Okay. Interesting. So what?
And for Orbit
Okay.
Sons, they have like a fish-like approach where they do not make set lists. They go up and they like take requests. They jam songs out. They play them differently every night. They do like no show. They don't have any idea what the show's going to be until they play it.
So what happened to Sponge?
Sponge is grunge.
Is that so? Is that what I mean?
That's what I assume
I
happened.
don't.
Like it's probably in some of the earlier albums too. With as long as he's been playing with these other groups, maybe some of that.
Yeah. So the Orbit
Yeah,
Sons,
you're
their
right.
first album came out in 2002.
Okay, so there you go.
So that would make sense. That would be when that influence started to creep in.
Mhm.
Which I mean, again, just shocks me. The first few songs of Lavatorium that just sounded like they were recorded directly after Rotting Pinata.
Sure.
Or, I mean, just crazy.
Yeah, but at least the man he is not a monolith.
Yeah. No, that's interesting that there is some variety there.
There is. And those are not the only bands he's been a part of. So our 6 degrees here for the day. He was actually briefly in a supergroup called Spies for Darwin. And he was recruited for that group by a man named Sean Kinney, who was drumming for Alice in Chains at the time. And Mike Inez from Alice in Chains was also in that group.
Hey.
So there you
Okay.
go. So now you're getting that influence too. It's all
Yeah.
coming together.
It is all making a lot of
Right?
sense now. Why? Okay.
Highlight. I usually try to avoid this if I can, but it's Rotting Pinata. It's their first
Yeah.
album. It has their biggest hit. It's got their only RIAA certification. It spent 40 total weeks on the charts, even though it peaked at 58. That's still pretty much the best that they did in any category for anything.
Right.
So congratulations to them. And their low light comes out. Now, this is a band, much like you mentioned before with Cake. Vinny Dombrowski is the only person in the band currently who is in the band.
Right.
When they started, there's been a lot of members in and out. But one of the original members on guitar, Mike Cross, did pass away in 2022.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that would, I think, qualify as the low light for the group.
Sure.
I'm sure that they still cared very much, and that was probably a difficult time. For Mean and Nice, I was able to find one thing that I think was nice. And here is what it is. And
Okay.
it's also a 6 Degrees of Totem Talks,
Oh.
nice thing. Because they contributed to a John Lennon cover album, like a tribute album, that where all of the proceeds for the album were donated to the Humane Society. So
Nice. That
was
is nice.
And some of the there were a lot of people who were also on this record, but of bands that we've also covered, we have Candlebox who contributed,
Hey.
as well as George Clinton, because we did cover Parliament.
Oh, you know what? Oh man, I forgot we covered Candlebox.
Yeah, we did.
My whole shtick about the monkeys last week is
I
completely false.
I know, and I almost said something to you about it, and I was like, no, I'll let him have this thing.
Well,
I
to
was
be
thinking
fair,
about it.
the guy from Candlebox never bought me a drink.
Yeah, that for sure.
So Mickey Dolenz still the only guy I met that bought me a drink from a band we've covered.
Exactly. But there are a lot of like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blues Traveler, The Flaming Lips, Cheap Trick, Collective Soul. There are a lot of groups that were a part of that. So that's it. I think it's time for grading because I have nothing else to say.
Well, then let's grade them. Let's do it.
All right, starting out with Cake. Cake, we have at least here 3 or 4 different hits that we need to keep in mind. This is a band that to me is definitely below average, but definitely like in the 2 to 3 range. Maybe even leaning closer to 3. They've had consistent success in hits and chart success and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was leaning in the twos, closer to a 3. Like probably like a 2.6 ish, based on the 2 hits and then a little bit of the sustained.
Right, and I will say,
endurance of
they
those hits.
had 3 albums that did go platinum. So it's not like it was all flash in the pan. They had a couple of hits on one album and it was gone. Like, no, they were pretty consistent. And like I mentioned, even their newest album did debut at number 1. So
Okay. So are you a little higher than 2.6 then?
yeah, I was leaning a little bit higher. Still in the 2s, but maybe more like a 2.7, 2.8.
Let's give him a 2.8. I'm feeling generous.
Yeah, excellent. Sponge is lower.
Sponge is lower.
Now, I will say that while I did not really I wasn't sure about whether or not any of their hit, they did get a gold album off of it, so it was popular, and they did have, while none of their songs quite hit the top 40, they did have 5 different songs in the top 20 of the mainstream rock charts. So they were getting played on rock stations, even if they were not getting played necessarily on the pop station or getting played across the board.
Okay.
So that is something. I do think 5 minor hits might be worth more than 1 big one, but not by a lot. It's a band that maybe we're talking about in the low 1s for.
Yeah,
at max.
that's kind of the vibe that I was getting. I could see them getting at like a 1-2.
Yeah, sure.
That feels
That's
good. A
totally
little more
fine.
than just like a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
But
No,
still low.
I agree with you. Breath of War Cake had exactly 6 albums, so they have exactly 5 points to start. And then, as I mentioned, they are going to get a little bit here because they did have a double platinum and then 2 more
Two
platinum
other
albums after
platinums.
that. So
Yep.
I'd be fine giving them at least in the 0.2 to 0.3 range, I guess.
Yeah, I'm fine with the 0.2. That seems good to give him a little bit of a bump.
All right, and speaking of 0.2, I'm going to say I'm going to give Cake a 0.15.
Okay.
I'm going to let you do with that what you will.
Well, that does round up to a 2 already.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're already giving them the 2, which is fine. I would give them a 0.1.
Okay.
I think there was enough of like the shtick wore thin to me a little bit, but still enjoyable in the overall.
Yeah. Now, Sponge, on the other hand, starts at a 5.5 with their 9 records, and they had 1 gold. So they don't quite hit the minimum threshold for keeping their score. This is going to go down a little bit.
Yeah,
The fact that they did at least have a gold, I think, helps them here, and some charting singles. So I'm not taking a ton off, but I am taking some.
I would agree. I think that's
So it's up to you. I think it's still in the 0.2 to 0.3 range difference here.
yeah. I think we probably go down a 0.2 from the typical starting score.
Okay. And I'm tempted to leave them alone.
That see that. Mm, I'm
Although I mean,
struggling.
I could be talked as high as giving them a 0.1. Like I didn't
No,
not like the albums, but I definitely thought Cake was the more enjoyable artist this week, album for album.
I would agree with you there. For me, like I was really debating taking a 0.1 or
I never
leaving them blank.
I never thought it was bad enough to do that. I would leave them
Right, and
blank, but
that was kind of my vibe, but I also felt like you know what? I'm fine leaving them where they are.
all right.
I felt like I was going to be a little lower than you, so when you came in at even, I was like thrown back a bit, but
Okay.
I'm fine. I think
Yeah.
because technically we are. I am
I
lower
think
than
I
you.
almost think of them. They're like I'll say I'm putting them on the positive side of nothing.
Right, you're
I'm
putting
giving them
them
a
closer to a
point
one.
oh four.
Yeah, and I would put them at like a negative point 0.8
Okay.
or you know what I meant,
Sure.
to where it rounds to 0.
Yeah, we'll give them nothing. Instrumental talent. I think these are kind of difficult scores for me.
Yeah,
Cake was weird for this. Like I definitely heard things here that made me go, "Oh, cool." I will say definitely in terms of the trumpet playing too. Like that was good. Like I really enjoyed a lot of what that brought to the band, and I think it was well performed.
it's interesting. I want to be clear, just for the sake of full information here, based on various points of Wikipedia and like various sources that I saw through like articles and stuff. In the band member timeline on Wikipedia, it has Vince DeFiore as a member the entire time with John McRae. But I've
Okay.
seen it multiple places where John McRae is referred to as the only consistent member of Cake. So there's definitely some conflicting reports there. So that doesn't really affect this moment, more so as like just for the sake of our podcast and our complete research here.
Yeah.
He could like I don't know the answer to that question. I
Okay.
know that there is conflicting reports now.
Gotcha.
Just want to be clear.
Okay. I'm just checking their other albums that we didn't listen to real quick just to see if he's credited, and so far he's credited on all of them, and he is credited on all of them.
So it might be one of those things where
So
maybe he was credited on all the
sure.
albums, but took a break from the band at some
Yeah.
point
Right.
between albums. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, look, there were moments above a 5 for me, and there were also moments of like just not.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
that's Cake. I mean, that's tough for me. That's tough. I mean, I'm almost like okay, just a 5.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like they themselves are averaging out, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not just like they're playing to the average. It's like they are both above and below the average at various points of their discography.
Yeah.
and I think that they get a little bit of a bonus for having a trumpet player and
Yeah, I
having like
agree.
he plays other horns as well. I think John McCrae is a decent like vocalist.
Yeah, and it
He
grew on
doesn't
me the
always
more I listened.
showcase it.
Right, but he grew on me.
Yeah. So I'm fine giving them a 5. I think that's fair.
Okay. And then we have Sponge. I think maybe the score slightly higher, maybe due to the nature of the music and the type of singing
It's
you get, as
slightly more
well as
musical
yeah.
and more,
I mean, it's
and the
good.
singing
Like this
is
was
more
definitely never a
lyrical.
problem for me.
Yeah.
With Sponge was the talent that we were hearing. I'm still gonna give them a number in the fives, but it's a number in the fives.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably still cap out around a 5.5 because
But yeah,
I've heard, and here's the problem again, specifically with grunge. When you are singing grunge, you are comparing yourself to Chris Cornell. You're comparing yourself to Kurt Cobain. You're comparing yourself
Lane Staley.
to Lane Staley. You're comparing your like Eddie Vedder. Like you're comparing yourself to like world class vocalists. And Vinny Dombrowski is a good vocalist.
He is.
And so like it's just tough because of the comparison in the genre is so astronomical, and it's like I understand that like when you play rock, like yeah, you could technically be compared to the Beatles, or you could be compared to like Foreigner or something like that, but like the style of music is different.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you look at the style of music. Like oh my gosh, I never remember the name of this stupid band. They're not a stupid
Okay.
band. The band who sounds like Led Zeppelin.
Oh, Greta Van Fleet.
Greta Van Fleet. That's because it's a weird name.
It
I
is.
enjoy their music, but it's a weird name. But like they get
Yeah, it is.
compared so much to Led Zeppelin because not only is the lead singer sounding like Led Zeppelin, their style of music in their earlier work sounds very Zeppelin-esque. So you get that
Definitely.
comparison one to one. And that's what's happening here. It's like you get that comparison to these other bands because you are sounding so much like them. And it's
Yeah.
tough.
All right, I'll give him a 5.4, and I'm going to move on to songwriting.
Let's do it.
And here's the thing: I'm positive on this for Cake. I feel
Same.
like they carve out a niche that is super unique to them. I feel like it pulls from different parts of rock and roll, uh, and it grows. I mean, it's always very identifiably Cake, but there is a little bit of growth from album to album. I would be willing to give them like a 6-ish here. I mean, I think it's
I
hard.
was thinking a 6 even,
Yeah,
personally.
it would be hard to give less than that for a band that is
Yeah.
like so unique
It
in what they
felt
bring to the table.
very, they do the thing that we talk about on this podcast, which is you become instantly recognizable in your genre.
Hmm.
And that is very important.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
it's very important to be able to quickly go, oh, there's Cake. I remember
Hmm.
Cake, even if I haven't heard this song.
Yeah. No, all right, good. So 6 there, and Sponge has the opposite problem.
Yeah, Sponge sounds like grunge. Pretty
Yeah, I mean,
stereotypical
not
grunge.
just in terms of like the words sound similar and they rhyme together.
Definitely that as well, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I
maybe
really
intentional.
wish there was like a genre of music that pretty famously rhymed with crud. And that's what you like. I was like Sponge does grunge, and Crud does Spud. Like I
Yeah,
really wish, but alas, I was disappointed.
yeah,
Which sums up my songwriting score for Sponge.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's bad. I do think there were some interesting like chordal choices at different points within the songs. They weren't like very predictable, or just like using the same old tired progressions. So I'm not willing to go really low on them, but I am willing to go below average.
I feel like it's in the higher fours.
Oh,
It's
sure.
it's in the higher fours. It's a little bit below average because I said it during their initial reviewing. Like it lacks the ingenuity that I want from a
Yeah,
musician.
sure. I get that. I would be willing to give a 4.7 and move on.
Let's do it.
Poetic talent. There was one moment between either of these bands that really stuck out to me, and I already talked about it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and let you take the
Here's the thing.
forefront here.
I think they're both fine. I think they're both totally fine. There wasn't any really like poetic masterpiece moments to me. I did enjoy for Sponge on Wax Ecstatic. They had almost like a theme with the drag queens of Memphis and then the death of a drag queen later on in the album.
Okay.
So there was like a little bit of an attempt at like a couple moments there. And also like the grunge sound also is usually equipped with like rather anhedonic lyrics and like kind of like anarchist esque stuff that they kind of avoided in the most part lyrically. So I will give them their credit there, their flowers for those moments. I would say that Sponge may be like a slightly higher score here because the effort is clear, and whereas with Cake, the effort is to sound effortless and sarcastic and lackadaisical,
Hmm.
which they accomplish, but the
Yeah.
very nature of that means it almost sounds like you don't give a shit.
Yeah, but I don't think that
So,
makes it bad either.
no, it's not
I
like
wouldn't
it's
be
not a
willing to take
bad
away points
score.
for it.
No, 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 but it doesn't give them as many points, I'm saying. So like
Okay.
for Sponge, I'm probably leaning like the 5-6 range,
Okay.
5.6 to be clear.
I will give you
And
that.
for Cake, I'm probably more in like the 5-2-ish range.
I'll give you both.
They're still above average.
Sure.
And the one thing with Cake that I'll give is I'll say is even though their second most famous song is a cover, like even Gloria Gaynor said like they changed a lot of that song to make it their own version of it, and I'll give them that. Like I'll give them their moment there.
All right.
It's like they weren't just regurgitating the lyrics.
Sure. All right. Well, I don't have any X Factor for Sponge. I don't know if you have any for Cake.
I really don't. I
Excellent.
looked. I looked. I mean, I was looking for like awards and nominations. Their awards and nominations section is they got nominated once for a VMA, and the rest of them are the California Music Awards, which I had never previously
No.
heard of.
Would you
And
give
they're all
Cake,
just nominations.
would you give Cake any points for the fact that Robert Christgau described their first album as unambiguity from the near side of cool?
No, I certainly would not.
What does he just like? Nothing
It's
he
Mad
says
Libs.
means anything.
It's Mad Libs. Well, I often like the more that I read critics, the more that I realize like they can't mean anything. It
Like
has to all be able to be interpreted in ways. Even though you're giving a score, it has to all be interpreted. Like if it's not interpretable and it's just like you're reading it, then people will just look at the number and move on, which
Yeah.
a lot of people still do.
Yep. All right. Well, then I have a final score, and here it is.
I'm excited.
And winning this week's episode. I'm sure you hit something. I can't hear it. So whatever. I'm just hoping that it's done now. But Cake won. Cake won this episode. It
Nice.
was close though. They got a 24.5. And Sponge, in honor of the fact that it is now February while we're recording this, got that. Scored a 2.2. So 22.2, all twos in honor of the month of February. Very good.
Congratulations, Sponge.
Yeah.
But real congratulations to Cake. You
For
may
sure.
collect your episode winning trophy at any time. It does require you to be on the show.
And it is a sponge cake.
It is a sponge
That
cake.
is the reward.
Yes, Nick will bake you a sponge cake.
That's correct. Now, next week, we're going to find out how much difference can a blue oyster make.
I feel like we're all excited.
I don't know.
We're all excited
Yeah.
to find out.
We're very excited.
Anyway,
that's what we'll
thank
find
you. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to having everybody come back and hang out with us. As always, a fun episode. A pleasure to get to hang out and chat music, and hopefully we will one day uncover who is the greatest artist of all time.
Maybe next week.
Maybe next week. Who knows? Maybe it is the Blue Oyster. Just the Blue
Yeah, this could
Oyster.
be.
All right, y'all. Stay safe. Have a great week. But most importantly, have a great day. Cool.
Nice.
We did it. We podcasted.
I knew we could do it.
Our first time.
Our first time here, season 7, episode 7.
A good place to start.
It is.
You never want to start at the beginning.
God, no.
Because then it's like you're just learning. At this point, we already know what we're doing.
Right, exactly.
We're 7 seasons in. It's the perfect
That was
time to
smart.
start.
That was smart. Well, who do you want next week? Because I know who I want, but
I'll let you pick. I picked cake.
all right, I will take the Blue Oyster Cult.
I figured that was what you were gonna pick.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. The Cult is described as hard rock, alternative rock, gothic rock, and early post-punk.
Good. Love all of that.
Yes, that will be interesting.
Well, it's always interesting.
I'll tell you this: there is no section on their Wikipedia page called shit. Well, there's no section on their Wikipedia page called controversy.
I mean, that's a plus.
Yeah, there is a part with lawsuit. There is a lawsuit involved in here somewhere. I don't know what it's about. Okay. I've got it. It could possibly be like it's not that bad. It's not.
Okay.
It's not an ideal. It was basically like an unauthorized use of a picture on an album cover.
Okay,
So like, there was a lawsuit over whether or not they should use that picture.
after the low light this week. If I find a similar low light next week, Nick, I will be very upset.
I mean, it
with you.
looks like you shouldn't.
That's what I thought last time.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point.
Uh,
All right, looks like they're not long albums either. That's nice.
that is nice.
Okay.
Well,
Got some sales here. You got a couple of RIAA platinums and a gold. I'm kind of surprised. Now I have to go look at my band and see if they have higher certifications, and they don't. I am shocked. They have 1
interesting.
platinum and 3 golds, whereas your band has 1 gold and 2 platinums. I would have guessed the other way.
I would also have guessed the other way. All right. Cool. I think my plan tomorrow is I'm gonna grab the most recent of every Ron track again.
Okay.
And just because I have some like general notes from like when I
Sure.
had listened previously, but just like make sure that I'm getting everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have a handful of notes for different songs too.
we should pick an order.
I already
So-
have some thoughts, but yes, I agree.
If you have thoughts on order, I'll defer to you on that. Like I want like whatever we think is going to be the most productive.
Sure.
Probably like, just based on it, like non-vocal stuff in the very beginning, and then just because early in the day, even though
Yeah,
11's
for
not
sure.
early, but
Oh, I thought when you said order, you were talking about figuring out like the album order and listening to the songs in a certain order,
Oh,
like trying to figure out how we're going to be
yeah.
placing things too.
I
Um,
firmly,
as a
that's
big
something I was thinking that was going to come a little later, but yes,
Sure. I mean, but we already have the songs are all recorded now, so we are, at least the beginnings of them.
we're
So
in the
yeah,
zone of, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, nothing else is going to be added at this point, I don't think. Especially
Don't
if we're
jinx it.
shooting for an April release.
Don't jinx it. You're jinxing it.
I'm okay.
Now
Whatever.
inspiration will strike in studio.
Anything else that comes up will be either a single that we can add separately,
And
or
now you have confirmed that we will write the perfect song for this album on Saturday in studio.
goddamn, yeah.
I didn't do it. You just did it.
All right. Well, we're not gonna put it on the album, or we'll take one of the songs that's on the album and we'll make that a single and we'll put that song on the album.
And
We'll
that if
release
that
the
has
single
to
on an album.
happen, I mean, I'm just saying you're playing with fire, Nick.
I know.
You're playing with absolute fire.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to eat. I'm gonna go eat.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I guess figure out dinner as well. So
Good luck to you.
yeah, good luck to you as well. I'll see you in a day and a half.
Excellent.
Adios. All right. It says we have 2 viewers. So if you're viewing, thanks for doing that. If you were commenting at all, I'm really sorry. The comments didn't work today. If you weren't commenting, that's also fine. I feel like I've covered all the bases there. I think I got it all handled. So thanks for tuning in. And everybody have a great day. Stay safe.